Welcome back to another deep dive from the Medium Rare Network.
It's great to be here.
We love plunging into these currents of knowledge, pulling out, the vital insights, the surprising facts from the sources you share with us.
And today's topic is a really fascinating one. Ancient, but still echoing.
Exactly. We're peeling back the layers on humanity's enduring, almost primal fascination with the numbers.
Not just for counting things, right?
No, not at all. But for uncovering profound meanings, cosmic truths even.
And our main guide today is E.T. Bell's work from 1933, Numerology, along with some other historical takes.
Yeah, Bell's book is seminal, and his own story of getting into this is, well, kind of amazing.
It really is. It tells you something about how these ideas grab people.
Yeah.
Apparently, his passion for it was sparked when his cleaning lady turned on the radio.
On the radio, seriously?
Yeah, some program called Swami something or another's half hour with the numbers and the stars.
You're kidding.
Nope. He was initially really annoyed, called it an infernal thing. But then he got hooked. Really hooked.
Yeah.
So much so that he started investigating it professionally, trailing it, as he put it, about everywhere, like a lover.
That's incredible. From annoyance to professional obsession, what a way to start.
Right. And it sets up the core question he asks, which really frames our whole discussion today.
Here she is.
Is there more science in numerology than there is numerology in science?
Ooh, okay. That's a deep one. Because that line, it does seem pretty blurred sometimes, doesn't it?
Very blurred. And that blurring leads to, well, both profound insights and some really persistent misconceptions. Millennia worth.
All right, let's dive in. Where do we start? With the big guy himself.
Has to be Pythagoras. Can't talk about this without him. Roughly 504 to 495 BCE.
And he wasn't just a mathematician, was he? Bell paints him as this multifaceted figure.
Totally. Traveler, student of ancient lore, top-tier mathematician, sure, but also a mystical lecturer, a showman.
A showman.
Yeah, and the founder of secret societies. He was complex.
And those travels were important, weren't they? To Egypt, Babylon.
Hugely important. He wasn't just sightseeing. He was absorbing geometry, astronomy, number systems, music, weaving it all together.
Trying to build a unified picture of everything.
Exactly. Seeking that grand, unified theory of the cosmos.
And then he sets up his school in Croton, southern Italy. The Brotherhood.
Right. And what's really striking about that school, something Bell highlights, is how progressive it was.
You mean admitting women?
Yeah, admitting women on an equal footing with men, including his own wife, Theano.
That feels incredibly modern for that era, especially compared to later Greek thinkers.
It really does. Bell calls it a testament to his civilized liberality. Very forward-thinking for the time.
Okay, so he's got this school, this broad knowledge. What's his big breakthrough? Bell calls it his first in science.
That would be the law of musical intervals. His epical discovery, as Bell puts it.
The first time someone found a definite physical law, right?
The first recorded instance, yeah. Finding that clear, measurable link between small whole numbers 3, 4, 6, and musical consonances. The fourth, the fifth, the octave.
There's that story about the blacksmith's shop, isn't there? With the hammers?
Ah, yes, the traditional fable.
Yeah.
Probably not literally true, but it paints a picture.
Him hearing the different clangs, figuring out it relates to the hammer weights?
Right. It's a good story, but the more likely method, the more scientific one, involved experiments.
With a stretched string.
Exactly. A stretched string, a movable bridge, plucking it, sliding the bridge, noticing how the pitch changed with the length of the vibrating part.
And finding those precise ratios, 6 to 4 to 3 for the consonances?
Yeah. Direct observation, empirical, leading to a quantifiable law.
Even though the full physics explanation, like Fourier analysis, wouldn't come for centuries.
Right. That came much, much later. But Pythagoras saw the underlying number pattern.
A beautifully simple relation, Bell says. It must have seemed like magic, linking numbers and sound like that.
It absolutely astonished them. But here's where Bell introduces the tragic turn.
The scientific death.
Precisely. This brilliant success, grounded in experiment, ironically led him down a completely different path.
He made a huge leap, didn't he?
A massive leap. He figured if music, if aesthetics, can be measured by numbers,
Then everything else can be too. Virtue, friendship, love, justice.
all of it. He believed all these human values must also be similarly amenable to the beautiful discipline of numbers.
So he ditched the experiments.
That's the tragedy Bell points to. He turned his back on experiment,
And just went full abstract speculation.
indulged in an orgy of mathematical speculations on the nature of the universe as a whole, that famous declaration, All things are numbers.
He wasn't just saying numbers describe things. He was saying numbers are things.
Exactly, identifying the map with the territory itself. For him, number was the ultimate reality.
And Bell's argument is that this decision, this turning away from experiment, it cost us.
He argues it delayed the real start of the scientific method. Galileo timing the lamp with his pulse in 1581 by maybe 2,000 years.
Wow, 2 millennia. That's staggering to think about if he'd stuck with the experiment.
Who knows, right? A major intellectual detour.
Okay, so let's dig into that worldview. All things are numbers. Bell brings up Thales, the earlier philosopher.
Right. Thales said, everything is water. Concrete, tangible.
But Pythagoras says everything is number. Abstract. Why the shift?
That's the deep mystery Bell talks about. It signals this fundamental move towards abstraction, looking for the invisible organizing principles, not just the material stuff.
It's a different way of trying to understand reality.
Completely. It's a leap into the conceptual. Bell notes that figuring out why numbers, not water, would plumb the deepest mystery of numerology.
And Pythagoras seemed to have this reverence for numbers themselves, for pure math.
Yeah, what Bell calls a somewhat bemused attitude, valuing math for its own sake, separate from practical use.
But there's an irony there, isn't there? Bell mentions that mathematician H.J.S. Smith.
The joke about the scandalous uselessness of his discovery.
Exactly. He thought it was purely theoretical, beautiful, but useless.
And then it turns out to be crucial for crystal structure theory, which underpins, metals, modern materials, even weapons.
So the purest math finds incredibly practical applications down the line.
It often does. Shows you can't always predict where these abstract ideas will lead.
Okay, let's get into some of the specific meanings the Pythagoreans gave numbers. This is where it gets pretty wild.
Definitely. Take 10, the number 10.
A perfect number, right?
Philosophically perfect, yeah. They base their whole cosmology on it. Believe there had to be 10 celestial bodies orbiting a central fire.
But weren't there only 9 known then? Sun, moon, Earth, the 5 planets, and the sphere of stars?
Right, so to make it 10, they just invented one.
The counter.
The counter-Earth. Always hidden behind a central fire, conveniently.
That's amazing. Letting the desired number dictate reality. Belief proving existence.
Classic numerology in action. Then there's 6.
6, the first perfect number, because 1 + 2 + 3 = 6.
Exactly. Some of its proper divisors. And this perfection was directly linked to creation.
God created the world in 6 days because 6 is perfect.
That was the belief. 6 was the most productive of all numbers.
And Bell mentions that echo in modern science. Professor Eddington.
Yeah, Eddington playfully suggested that if nature's arithmetic had somehow skipped the number 6, organic life might not exist.
Because of things like the benzene ring, 6 carbon atoms.
Exactly. Benzene, crucial for organic chemistry. A fun, if speculative, connection across millennia.
What about other numbers? 5 was marriage.
Yep. 5 is 2 + 3. 2, the first even number, seen as feminine. 3, the first odd number after 1, seen as masculine.
So feminine plus masculine equals marriage.
That was the idea. Bell points out the prehistoric phallicism in that interpretation, these deep-seated associations.
And 2 itself was opinion.
Identified with opinion, yeah. Seen as feminine, unlimited, variable, and indeterminate.
Bell jokes it might reflect a row with Pythagoras' wife, Theano.
Huh, maybe. It shows how they projected human, often gendered, qualities onto numbers.
7 was lucky.
7 was the critical time, the lucky time, believed to mark climacterics in human life. The 7 ages of man kind of idea.
And odd versus even numbers had huge significance.
Massive dualities projected onto them.
Yeah.
Odd was limited, unity, good, reason, masculine. Even was unlimited, duality, evil matter, disorderly, feminine. Really fundamental categories.
Wow. And then there were amicable numbers like 220 and 284.
Right. Pairs where the sum of one number's proper divisors equals the other number and vice versa.
And they saw that as reflecting friendship.
A closer friendship, yeah. Intimacy. The idea that numerical relationships mirrored human and cosmic bonds, it's all interconnected.
Even their idea of dimensions was based on numbers.
It was unique. A point is one-dimensional, needs 1 point. A
Yep.
line is two-dimensional, needs 2 points. A plane three-dimensional needs 3 points, like a triangle. A solid four-dimensional needs 4 points, like a tetrahedron.
Using the minimum number of points to define the shape.
Exactly. It's a geometrical concept rooted entirely in simple counting.
And we still use square and cube for powers today. Echoes of that thinking.
Absolutely. And some attempts to explain the fourth dimension still kind of draw on these old mystical geometric ideas. These concepts run deep.
Okay, so we have this intricate number-based cosmos. Everything fits, everything has meaning. But then the explosion.
Yeah, around 410 BC. The discovery that shattered everything. Incommensurables. Irrational numbers.
Like the square root of 2.
The classic example. The problem was the core Pythagorean belief.
Mm-hmm.
Everything, absolutely everything, is measurable by common whole numbers, ratios of integers.
Rational numbers.
Right. But then they found things like the diagonal of a square, its length compared to the side length. You can't express it as a ratio of two whole numbers. It has no common measure.
And that broke the system.
Completely. It meant the universe contained quantities that didn't fit their neat numerical scheme. Infinitely many, in fact. Bell puts it bluntly. The exact opposite of what numerology asserts is closer to the truth of observation.
How did they react? Bell says Pythagoras tried to suppress it.
Apparently, yes. Tried to keep it secret within the Brotherhood, which is strange for someone supposedly seeking truth.
Very strange. But the truth got out.
It did. And a generation later, Plato. He was horrified.
That's where the swine comment comes in.
Yeah. He supposedly declared that anyone ignorant of incommensurables wasn't a man, but a swine. Shows you how fundamental, how devastating this discovery felt.
And the consequence, according to Bell.
1,000 years of stagnation. Darkness, triviality in this line of thought. The central pillar was knocked out, mathematically. But the implications weren't fully absorbed in a productive way for a long time.
Wow. So, speaking of Plato, let's talk about his weird nuptial number.
Yes. 12,960,000. 60 to the fourth power.
A passage in his Republic that just baffled people for centuries. What was it about?
It was incredibly obscure, but Bell highlights that it was finally cracked, relatively recently in his time, by a mathematician named Grace Chisholm Young.
In 1923. That's quite late.
It is. Her paper in the Proceedings of the London Mathematical Society was apparently groundbreaking in deciphering Plato's meaning, a major contribution.
And where did this number even come from? Bell mentions Babylon.
The conjecture is it connects back to ancient Babylonian priests and their base 60 number system, sexagesimal.
So this number had roots long before Plato.
Seems likely. Flowing through cultures, picking up significance.
And what did Mrs. Young figure out about Plato's meaning? It involved specific numbers.
Yeah, she showed it related to this tribe of numbers, specifically 3, 4, 5, and 6, and how they fit these unique equations.
Like 3 squared plus 4 squared equals 5 squared. A
Yeah.
Pythagorean theorem.
Right, but also 3 cubed plus 4 cubed plus 5 cubed equals 6 cubed.
Whoa. Okay, that's neat.
Very neat. And while 12,960,000 was one of the numbers fitting Plato's description, she argued that 20,250,000 was the actual nuptial number he intended, based on this interlocking relationship.
Complex stuff, numbers fitting together in specific ways.
Exactly. A whole family, or tribe, as Plato put it.
And Bell had a joke about this, mixing numbers and marriage.
Yes, he quipped. Monogamy is the best policy. Maybe suggesting you shouldn't mix your mathematics and your marriage speculations too freely.
Okay, so numerology takes a hit with irrationals, but it doesn't die out, it morphs. Let's talk about how it manifested later. The infamous 666.
The number of the beast. From the book of Revelation, this led to the practice of beasting a man.
Assigning numbers to letters and a name to identify the Antichrist.
Exactly. And this sparked a major numerological feud in the 16th century. Bell calls it the Battle of the Windmills.
Between two mathematicians, Stiefel and Bung.
Michael Stiefel and Peter Bung. Stiefel, the German algebraist, went first. He fastened 666 on the Pope, Leo X.
How did he manage that?
He used the Latin Leo Decimus, summed the Roman numeral values L50, E0, D500, E0, C100, I1, M1000, V5, S0. Gets tricky with letter values, but his calculation yielded 1666. Then he subtracted the M, representing Mysterium or 1000.
Leaving 666. Clever, if biased.
Very. But Bung retaliated. He turned around and beasted Martin Luther with the same number, 666, using his own letter number system.
So they both proved the other guy was the beast.
Essentially, yes. And that's what killed it, according to Bell. It murdered the sacred medieval numerology because it proved too much.
If anyone could be the beast, depending on the system used, the whole thing seemed arbitrary.
Exactly. The public apparently started saying it was all tripe. It lost its sacred authority.
But number interpretations continued in theology, didn't they? Bell's medieval whitewash.
Oh, absolutely. Figures like St. Augustine were masters of it.
Like the 153 fish caught by St. Peter.
That's a famous one. Augustine connects 153 to the sum of the first 17 numbers. 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 17 equals 153.
Why 17?
Because 17 is 10 plus 7. 10 represents the law, Old Testament commandments, and 7 the gifts of the Spirit, New Testament. So 17 symbolizes the union of both dispensations.
Wow, that's intricate.
Very. And he did similar things with the number 40, linked it to time, 4, and knowledge, 10 commandments again. Concluding 40 instructs us to live in time according to knowledge.
Justifying 40-day fasts.
Precisely. Numbers providing theological justification and structure.
Okay, so that's the more sacred side. What about what Bell calls profane numerology? The more everyday stuff.
Yeah, the more common, often commercial, less rigorous practices that are still around.
Like the Hollywood numerologist, Sir Charles.
Right. Bell describes him as this slicker-looking Englishman. Apparently knew very little actual math, couldn't tell a logarithm from the cube root of sin.
But he used fancy math terms.
Oh, yeah. Talked about logarithms and cube roots to disharmonize a woman's marriage to her husband.
Harmonize.
And then harmonize it with her director instead. For $1,000.
Cute!
He was based on a simple arithmetic trick, taking 3 consecutive numbers, adding their digits repeatedly till you hit a vibration of 6, then applying this 6 vibration to the people involved. Pure manipulation dressed up as math.
Unbelievable. And the stockbroker who changed his name.
Yeah, after the 1929 crash, lost money, consulted a numerologist, and legally changed his name.
Believing his original name number was ill-adjusted to his inner number.
Exactly. Believed changing the name would change his luck. Shows how desperate people can get, reaching for numerical control and chaos.
And then Bell makes that really controversial link to intelligence tests, IQ scores.
He does. He calls the assignment of IQ scores a form of beasting.
Seriously, why?
He criticizes the uncritical application of mathematical formulas to human affairs without fully understanding the limits and meanings of those methods. It's not that the math is necessarily wrong, but applying it simplistically to something as complex as human intelligence.
He sees it as potentially misleading, reducing a person to a number.
That seems to be his concern. He points to the debate around Spearman's gig, the idea of a single general intelligence factor as a borderline case. Is it truly science, or does it have a numerological flavor if applied too rigidly?
That's a really provocative thought. Makes you reconsider how we use numbers to categorize people today.
It definitely does. Where is the line between useful measurement and simplistic labeling?
Okay, let's shift focus again from the personal to the cosmic. The idea of eternal recurrence.
The recurrent nightmare, a big one in numerological and philosophical thought.
The idea that everything repeats exactly the same way, over and over.
Infinitely, rooted in observing cycles, periodicity.
And this goes way back. Bell traces it to Babylon.
To the ancient Babylonians, the Chaldean shepherds, they observed celestial cycles, like the precession of the equinoxes, that slow wobble of Earth's axis.
Which takes thousands of years.
They estimated around 36,000 years. Interestingly close to Plato's later ideas. And they generalized this cyclical idea from the heavens to, well, everything. The whole universe repeating in a great year.
And Aristotle's disciple Eudemus put it really chillingly.
He did. Around 325 BC, imagining repeating the exact same lecture, holding the same pointer to the same students, endlessly, like a recurring decimal, 0.210210210.
Bell calls it an appalling nightmare. No novelty, no freedom.
Exactly. And this idea echoes even in modern physics, doesn't it?
Bell mentions theories of an expanding and contracting universe. Friedman, Lemaitre.
Right. The idea that the universe might collapse back to a point, then re-expand, possibly in bigger and possibly better cycles. A sophisticated mathematical version of the ancient recurrence idea.
It wasn't just scientists thinking about this either. Philosophers, too. Nietzsche.
Nietzsche was famously tormented by it. The recurrent nightmare in its completest, most self-contradictory form, as Bell says.
Believing the entire universe shatters and reforms exactly the same way countless times.
Yeah. He thought he was the first to grasp it fully, but Bell calls him its eminent victim. Shows the sheer power, the psychological grip of this cyclical, numerical concept.
And the way people imagine these cycles change, too. From circles to parabolas.
Bell makes that contrast. The Greeks often pictured it as a simple, repeating circle. Idiotically simple, he says. But modern analogies, like a sand flea's increasing leaps forming a parabola, suggest cycles that grow or change bigger, maybe better repetitions. The imaginative framework evolves.
So we have these grand cosmic theories, personal applications, critiques. How do we actually draw the line? What makes something science versus numerology when using math to describe the universe? Bell's touchstone.
It comes down to understanding isomorphism,
Isomorphism, it's same form.
roughly, yeah. Two things having the same underlying structure or pattern. Think of a road map.
Yuck.
The map is isomorphic to the territory. The relationships between towns on the map mirror the relationships in reality. B is between A and C on both.
Makes sense.
In science, a good mathematical theory, the map is isomorphic to the physical phenomena, the territory. It accurately reflects the structure.
So what's the numerologist's mistake?
Bell says it's a complete and final confusion between maps and things mapped.
They think the map is the territory.
Exactly. If someone says the cosmos is pure mathematics, they're repeating Pythagoras' error. They're mistaking the description for the reality itself, like trying to drive on the paper map.
Whereas a scientist,
The scientific worker, as Bell calls them, holds no such belief. For them, mathematical theories are just tools. Convenient maps.
maps that can be changed or thrown out.
Absolutely. Radically revised, torn up any moment. The main concern is utility. Does the map help us navigate? Does it make correct predictions?
Not whether the map is the absolute truth.
Right. Science is driven by experiment, observation, and the unappeasable hobby of making ever better mathematical maps. They discard old theories like old shoes when better ones come along. It's pragmatic.
Bell gives that example of the modern miracle equation, right? Linking physical constants.
Yes. An equation popping up that seemed to perfectly connect things like the speed of light, electron mass, Planck's constant, pi,
Yeah.
looked like stunning cosmic harmony.
But Bell calls foul.
Completely. Says it's a numerological trick. The harmony is accidental, achieved by abusing the decimal point, playing with irrational numbers like pi until things seem to line up.
He showed you could do it with any number, like a license plate.
Exactly. A skilled mathematician could force apparent agreement anywhere, showing it's manipulation, not discovery.
Then there's Eddington and the number 137, the fine structure constant. That's more complex.
Much more complex. Eddington used serious physics relativity, quantum mechanics, to mathematically derive 137 and even predicted the total number of electrons in the universe based on it. He expected experimental proofs soon.
So that's science, but Bell still sees a numerological flavor.
Yeah, because even though it's rigorous math and physics, the act of inferring physical existence solely from mathematical elegance or fit before definitive empirical proof still carries that echo of Pythagoras, believing the math dictates reality. It pushes the edge between confirmed science and beautiful speculation.
So for Bell, science is ultimately indifferent to absolute truth.
Modestly indifferent, yeah. It prioritizes convenience, consistency, what works. It's neither sacred nor profane. It is just science, characterized by a free and easy irreverence for final answers.
And that critical stance is key, which brings us back to his critique of things like IQ tests.
Exactly. The uncritical application of math formulas to human life, that modern beasting, still seeing that blurry line where useful tools might become overly simplistic numerological labels.
Okay. So this whole journey seems to lead to some deep uncertainties, even about math itself.
Bell touches on that, mentions proofs emerging in his time about the impossibility of proving the consistency of basic arithmetic from within itself. Gödel's incompleteness theorems were fresh then.
Meaning our mathematical maps might not even be fully consistent or complete?
It raises that possibility, which connects the Kroneker's famous line, God made the integers, all the rest is the work of man.
And some mathematicians were trying to rebuild everything just using whole numbers. A return to Pythagoras.
Sort of, yeah. Debates about the very foundations of math were happening, showing the quest for certainty continues even there.
So given all the critiques, the logical problems, the scientific progress, why does personal numerology, the sucker rackets, still persist? Bell's needle's eye.
The needle eye is that core, untestable belief that things of the spirit and purely human values are mapped on the integers.
You can't prove it, but you can't disprove it either.
Exactly. It exists outside the realm of scientific verification or falsification. So it persists untouched by logical explosions like the discovery of irrationals.
So at the end of the day, it's about faith.
Bell concludes the whole question is ultimately one of belief or faith. You either accept that unprovable premise or you don't. Science can't settle it.
But that impulse behind it, the search for patterns, for meaning, that's deeply human, isn't it?
Absolutely. Even if it leads to ideas that seem mad or absurd. Pythagoras' dream of a number-based cosmos, flawed as it became. Bell still calls it the Most comprehensive dream ever dreamed by our race.
That fundamental drive to find order in the chaos.
It seems baked into us.
And Bell ends on that really provocative note about a revolution in thinking.
Yeah, that our generation is at the threshold of a revolution in the very rudiments of thinking, implying our whole way of understanding might shift radically.
Makes you wonder what current certainties might look completely different in the future. What will remain standing?
A truly unsettling but exciting thought to end on.
Wow, what a journey. From Pythagoras and his numbers, through history's twists and turns, right up to the edge of modern science and philosophy.
It really shows that deep, constant human desire to find order, to find meaning, whether it's through mystical connections or rigorous equations.
The relationship between belief, numbers, and how we map reality is just endlessly fascinating.
And constantly evolving. Our own maps are probably far from final.
So here's a thought to leave you with. In our world, which is so driven by data, by algorithms, by numbers everywhere, where do you draw the line?
Yeah, where's the line between a powerful mathematical model, a really useful, convenient map, and a belief that the numbers themselves, the data itself, holds the ultimate truth of existence?
Something to mull over. We really encourage you to continue your own deep dives. And hey, if you enjoyed this, let us know. Reach out to us on the Medium Rare Facebook page. We'd love to hear from you.
Definitely.
Join us next time on The Deep Dive as we continue to explore these fascinating hidden currents of knowledge, peeling back more layers to reveal the deep truths within.